Let me tell you something real. Nobody warns you about the moment you finally choose yourself, not the surface level self-care, not the motivational quotes. I mean the moment you decide that your life is no longer up for negotiation. Because when you choose yourself above all else, you don't just change direction, you change gravity. People feel it, systems resist it, and your old life starts asking questions. This is what really happens when you finally choose yourself. For most of our lives, we're standing still without realizing it, not because we don't have ability, but because we're waiting on a green light that never comes, waiting for approval from people who are just as uncertain as we are, waiting for validation from systems that profit off our hesitation, waiting for someone older, louder, richer, or more confident to say, yeah, you're ready. Now go ahead and live your life. And the truth is that moment almost never arrives because permission was never theirs to give in the first place. From a young age, we're trained into this mindset, taught to raise our hand, taught to wait our turn, taught to color inside lines, taught that wanting more should be quiet, and polite, taught that ambition needs to be justified and explained and approved, and over time that conditioning becomes a cage you don't even see anymore. You start editing your dreams before you speak them. You start downplaying your hunger so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. You start shrinking your vision to fit into rooms that were never built for you. And the wild part is nobody is holding you back directly anymore. You're doing it to yourself. You're asking for permission that nobody asked for when they built the world you're standing in right now. Every building, every brand, every shift in culture came from someone who decided they didn't need a vote to believe in their own vision. They moved first and let the results explain later. The moment you choose yourself, something breaks inside you in the best way possible. That internal voice that kept asking, am I allowed to do this, finally goes quiet. And another voice steps up, a steadier one that says, I'm doing this whether they understand it or not. And that's when movement happens. Not reckless movement, not loud movement, but intentional steps taken without applause, without reassurance, without a safety net. Look at anyone who built something from nothing and pay attention to the early chapters, not the highlight reels. The early chapters are always lonely. Empty rooms, low numbers, closed doors, unanswered emails, and quiet nights where doubt speaks louder than encouragement. Nobody was clapping for them. Then nobody was reposting. Nobody was validating the vision. They were acting while the room was quiet because they understood something most people don't. Momentum doesn't come from permission. It comes from consistency. When you stop seeking permission, your confidence changes texture. It's no longer borrowed confidence that depends on praise, likes, or external approval. It becomes owned confidence built through action, through showing up, through keeping promises to yourself, even when nobody else knows about them. That kind of confidence doesn't shake easily because it wasn't given. It was earned. Borrowed confidence disappears the moment criticism shows up. Own confidence stays even when nobody believes. Yet, even when the results are delayed, even when the path doesn't make sense to people watching from the outside, because you're not moving to impress. You're moving because standing still feels like betrayal to who you know you can become. There's a real shift that happens internally when you stop asking and start moving. You begin to trust your instincts more because you're actually using them. You learn faster because mistakes become teachers instead of proof that you shouldn't have tried. You stop romanticizing readiness and realize readiness is built in motion, not before. A lot of people say they're waiting to feel confident before they start, but confidence isn't the requirement, it's the reward. You don't wake up one day fearless. You become fearless by surviving fear repeatedly, by taking steps while your hands are shaking and realizing the world didn't end you, didn't break you. Adapted, you learned, and you got stronger. When you stop seeking permission, you also stop outsourcing responsibility. You stop blaming circumstances, parents, partners, society, timing, luck, because once you move on your own terms, the results belong to you fully. The wins feel heavier, the losses feel sharper, but both are honest, and honesty builds resilience. There's power in knowing whatever happens next is a direct response to your decision to move. This mindset changes how you walk into rooms, how you speak, how you listen. You're no longer trying to convince people of your worth. You're evaluating alignment. Instead, you're asking, does this space respect my time, my vision, my values? Not, will they accept me? And that subtle shift puts you in a position of authority over your own life, even if externally nothing has changed yet. Real life examples prove this over and over. Entrepreneurs who launch businesses while working night Shifts, artists who created before anyone cared, athletes who trained long before scouts showed up. The common thread isn't talent or luck. It's decision. They decided to move without permission and let the work introduce them later. Even data backs this up. Studies on self-efficacy show that people who believe they have control over their actions and outcomes are more likely to persist through obstacles and achieve long-term success. That belief doesn't come from encouragement alone. It comes from taking action and seeing yourself handle what comes next over and over again, choosing yourself. And this way doesn't make life easier. It makes it real. You lose the illusion of safety that comes with waiting, but you gain momentum, clarity, and self-respect. And once you feel that, once you experience what it's like to move without asking to build, without permission to trust your own judgment, you can't unlearn it. You start to see how much time you wasted negotiating with fear, how many opportunities you delayed because you wanted guarantees, how many versions of yourself you abandoned because they felt too bold, too loud, too different. And instead of guilt, you feel resolve to stop waiting for a moment that never existed. Because the truth is, permission is a myth used to keep potential manageable. And once you see that, once you understand that nobody is coming to authorize your purpose, your hunger, your vision, you stop waiting at the door and realize you were supposed to build your own entrance all along. This part is the one nobody really prepares you for. Because when you start growing, you expect resistance from enemies or outsiders, not from familiar faces, not from people who shared your table, jokes, your history, your struggles. You expect the pain to come from opposition, but most of the time it comes from separation, and that hits different because growth doesn't always show up as betrayal. Sometimes nobody does anything wrong. Sometimes nobody crosses you. Sometimes nobody switches up in an obvious way. Sometimes the only thing that changes is direction, and that's enough to create distance. When you choose yourself, you begin to move at a pace and in a direction that not everyone can or wants to follow. And it's important to understand that this isn't a failure of loyalty or love. Reality of evolution. People come into your life, align with who you were not always with, who you're becoming, and holding on to them out of guilt will slow both of you down, even if the bond is real. A lot of us were taught that growth means cutting people off, dramatically burning bridges, making statements, proving points, but real maturity doesn't move like that. Real maturity is quiet. It doesn't need announcements. It doesn't need explanations. It doesn't need permission. It just adjusts its path and keeps going, and whoever is meant to walk with you will naturally match the pace. There's a grief that comes with this, though, a subtle one, because you're not mourning a person, you're mourning a version of life that included them, a version of yourself that fit comfortably around them. And that's why it hurts, because you can still love people and recognize that proximity is no longer healthy or productive. And that's a hard truth to accept, especially when history is involved. Choosing yourself means accepting that some relationships were built on shared circumstances, not shared vision. You were connected by location, survival habits, old mindsets, or limited options. And when those circumstances change, the connection weakens, not because anyone failed, but because the foundation shifted. And instead of forcing it to stay, you honor what it was and let it be what it was meant to be. You don't owe everyone a detailed explanation of your growth, because not everyone is capable of understanding it from where they stand. Explaining yourself too much often comes from seeking validation for your evolution, and that defeats the purpose. Choosing yourself is trusting that your reasons are enough, even if nobody claps, even if nobody agrees, even if people misunderstand your silence as arrogance or your boundaries as distance. And there's something powerful about not dragging anyone with you, about resisting the urge to convince people to grow at your pace, because growth can't be forced. It has to be chosen, and trying to pull people forward before they're ready will only exhaust you and create resentment on both sides. Your responsibility is your path, not their readiness. Real growth often looks boring from the outside. Fewer conversations, fewer updates, fewer explanations. You start protecting your energy because you realize it's not unlimited. You become more selective with your time because you've learned that attention is currency, and you can't keep spending it everywhere and still expect to build something meaningful. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached. It means you become intentional. You learn the difference between love and access. You can love people deeply and still limit how much influence they have over your decisions, your mindset, and your future. And that distinction is where maturity lives. There are real-life examples everywhere. Athletes who leave hometowns to train at a higher level. artists who separate from old circles to focus on craft, entrepreneurs who step away from familiar environments to build something new. From the outside, it looks like abandonment, but from the inside, it's alignment. It's choosing environments that support who you're becoming, not who you were trying to survive. As studies on personal development even show that environment plays a major role in growth mindset and long-term success. People surrounded by forward-thinking, disciplined, goal-oriented peers are more likely to adopt those behaviors naturally. That doesn't mean your old circle was bad. It means they served a different version of you, and that version did what it needed to do to get you here. The hardest part is learning not to personalize the reactions people have to your growth. Some will feel left behind. Some will feel judged. Some will project their own fears onto your progress. And that's not your burden to carry. Their discomfort is often a mirror, not a measure of your wrongdoing. An understanding that allows you to move forward without resentment. Alignment matters more than attachment, because attachment without alignment becomes a weight. It pulls you back into old habits, old conversations, old ceilings, and you can't reach new levels. While carrying everything from the last one, maturity is knowing when to set things down without throwing them away, when to create space without creating enemies. You start to understand that distance doesn't always mean disconnection. Sometimes it's just a pause. Sometimes it's an adjustment. Sometimes it's a necessary gap for both sides to grow independently and maybe cross paths again later in a healthier way, or maybe not. And either outcome can be okay. When you choose yourself, you stop measuring relationships by longevity alone and start measuring them by contribution, not just what they give you, but what you give each other mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You ask, does this connection support growth or maintain comfort? And comfort can be dangerous when it keeps you small. This level of self-awareness changes how you move through life. You become less reactive, less defensive, less eager to explain yourself. You trust that those who understand you don't need explanations, and those who demand it might not be aligned with where you're going. And that clarity brings peace, even when it costs closeness. Outgrowing people without hating them is an act of respect for them. Respect for yourself, respect for the journey you shared, and the journey you're committing to. Now is choosing forward motion without bitterness, progress without ego, and growth without noise. And that quiet strength becomes one of the clearest signs that you're truly evolving. When you really choose yourself, something shifts in how you treat your time, your energy, and your word to yourself. You stop romanticizing motivation because you realize motivation is unreliable. It shows up when it wants and disappears when you need it most. And if your life depends on feeling inspired every day, then your progress will always be unstable. So instead of chasing feelings, you start building structure, routine, standards, systems that don't care how you feel, they only care that you show up. That's when discipline becomes personal, not punishment, not restriction, but commitment. It becomes the way you show love to your future self, the way you prove that your goals matter more than temporary comfort. You stop asking, am I in the mood, and start asking what needs to be done, because you understand that the life you want is built on boring days, repetitive actions, and quiet consistency, not on bursts of excitement. You show up tired because life doesn't pause when you're exhausted. Bills still come, responsibilities still exist, opportunities still pass by, and you learn that tired doesn't mean incapable. It just means human. So you adjust the pace, but not the direction. You show up bored because not every step is thrilling. Not every day feels meaningful in the moment. Some days are just maintenance. Well, maintenance is what keeps momentum alive, and you show up anyway because you've learned that showing up is the skill everything else builds on. Real transformation doesn't happen in dramatic moments. It happens in small decisions repeated daily. The choice to get up when nobody's watching, the choice to practice when nobody's clapping, the choice to stay focused when distractions are loud. Those moments don't go viral, but they compound, and compounding is how ordinary effort turns into extraordinary results over time. Every person you admire, every story of success you've ever studied has the same foundation underneath it: consistency. Talent might open the door, but discipline keeps you in the room. Talent can impress, but consistency builds trust, and trust is what creates opportunity. When talent doesn't show up, discipline does the work anyway, and that's why it wins long term. There are people with half the ability going twice as far simply because they refuse to quit on themselves. They don't wait to feel ready. They don't wait to feel confident. They rely on habits, not hype. They understand that confidence is built by keeping promises to yourself, and discipline is how you keep those promises even when nobody would know if you didn't. Choosing yourself means working in Silence, because you're not driven by external applause. You're driven by internal standards. You don't need an audience to perform because your goal isn't to be seen. It's to be solid. You learn to respect the grind because the grind is where identity is formed. When nobody's watching, you decide who you really are without pressure, without image, without expectation. But view effort, you stop seeing hard work as suffering and start seeing it as investment. Every early morning, every late night, every sacrifice is a deposit into a future that doesn't exist yet but feels real to you because you're building it brick by brick. Discipline teaches patience because it forces you to trust the process, even when results are delayed. There's science behind this too. Studies on habit formation show that behavior driven by routine lasts longer than behavior driven by emotions. Fluctuate, but systems sustain. When actions become automatic, they require less willpower. It means you can stay consistent even under stress. And that's why disciplined people often look calm under pressure. They're not relying on feeling good. They're relying on what they've practiced. Discipline also teaches self-respect because every time you do what you said you would do, you reinforce the belief that you're someone you can count on. And that belief spills into every area of life. How you speak, how you negotiate, how you handle adversity. You stop doubting yourself because you have proof, not opinions, proof that you can follow through. This is especially powerful when nobody's watching, because that's where integrity is built. Not the kind you talk about, but the kind you live when there's no reward, no recognition, no immediate payoff. You do the work anyway because you understand that shortcuts cost more in the long run and cutting corners only delays growth. It doesn't eliminate the price. A lot of people want the lifestyle without respecting the discipline behind it. They want the freedom without the structure, the results without the repetition. But freedom is earned through discipline first. Structure creates freedom later. And once you understand that, you stop fighting routine and start using it as a weapon. Discipline also protects you from distractions. It gives your day a backbone, so everything doesn't feel urgent or important. You become selective because you know every yes costs you something and every no protects something. You start saying no to things that feel good in the moment but don't serve the long-term vision because you're no longer living. Day to day, you're building. Year to decade. This doesn't mean you never rested. Means rest becomes intentional, not escapism. You rest to recover, not to avoid, and that's a big difference. Disciplined people know when to pause and when to push because they're listening to their purpose, not their excuses. Over time, discipline reshapes your identity. You stop saying, I'm trying, and start saying, this is what I do, this is who I am. I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone who finishes. I'm someone who stays consistent. And that identity becomes self-reinforcing because you act in alignment with who you believe you are. And the more you choose yourself in this way, the less you need external motivation because your drive comes from clarity. You know why you're doing this. You know what you're building. You know what's at stake. And that clarity fuels discipline even on days when everything feels heavy. Doing the work when nobody's watching is what separates wishers from builders. Because builders understand that the unseen hours are what make the visible moments possible. The lights only shine because someone wired the building long before anyone walked inside, and your discipline is that wiring, invisible, essential, and powerful. When discipline becomes your love language, you stop sabotaging your future for temporary comfort. You stop betraying your potential for convenience. You show your self-respect through action, and that self-respect becomes unshakable because it's built on evidence, not hope. And that's how choosing yourself turns into a lifestyle, not a phase, not a mood, but a standard you live by every single day. There's a truth most people don't hear until life forces it on them. The struggle you went through wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't a punishment. It was information. And when you don't understand that you carry pain like a burden, something heavy, something unfair, something you're trying to escape, but when you finally choose yourself, you start to see the pattern. You start to connect the dots and realize every setback, every loss, every moment you felt invisible was shaping the way you see the world now. The nights you question yourself, the doors that closed when you were ready, times you gave your best and still got overlooked, those moments carved depth into you. They gave you perspective that comfort never could. They taught you how it feels to be counted out, and that feeling sharpens vision, because once you've been there, you move differently, you speak differently, you build differently. You don't take opportunity lightly because you remember what it felt like to not have access. A lot of people get stuck asking, why me? Why did this happen? Why did I have to lose? Why did I have to struggle while others seem to glide through? But that question keeps you trapped in the past. It keeps you looking for fairness instead of power. Choosing yourself means shifting the question to, how can I use this? How can this experience serve something bigger than my pain? How can this lesson become leverage? When that shift happens, pain stops being something you run from and starts becoming something you mine. You dig into it, you study it, you extract meaning from it, because you realize the same experience that broke you at one point can become the foundation for your strength. Now your pain holds insight, empathy, resilience, and truth that can't be taught in classrooms or bought with money. Real life proves this over and over. People who grow up with nothing often develop resourcefulness that turns into innovation. People who experience loss often carry a depth of empathy that makes them leaders, healers, creators, mentors. The struggle forces you to see cracks in systems, flaws in thinking, gaps in opportunity, and once you see those things, you can't unsee them, and that awareness becomes purpose. Choosing yourself means refusing to be defined by what happened to you, but allowing what happened to inform who you become. You stop hiding your scars because you understand. Scars are evidence. They prove you survived. They prove you adapted. They prove you kept going. And there's power in that proof, especially in a world full of curated perfection and untested opinions. Pain also teaches discipline, because when you've been through enough, you stop wasting energy on what doesn't matter. You become focused because you know how fragile time is. You've seen how quickly things can change. And that awareness creates urgency, not panic, but purpose-driven urgency. You move with intention because you don't want to repeat lessons you already paid for. There's research showing that people who overcome adversity often develop higher levels of grit and emotional intelligence. Those traits are strongly linked to long-term success because they allow you to navigate uncertainty, pressure, and failure without folding. Your pain train you for environments that comfort could never prepare you for. And once you realize that, you stop wishing your past was easier and start appreciating that it made you capable. Repurposing your past doesn't mean glorifying suffering or staying stuck in it. It means extracting value without carrying the weight. It means telling your story without reliving the trauma. It means using what you learned to build something better, not just for yourself, but for others who are walking a path you already survived. When you choose yourself, you stop editing your story to make other people comfortable. You speak from experience, not theory, and that authenticity resonates because people can feel when wisdom is earned. They can hear it in your tone, see it in your decisions, feel it in your presence. You're no longer trying to sound impressive. You're trying to be effective. Pain also humbles you. It reminds you that nothing is guaranteed, and that humility keeps you grounded as you rise. You don't look down on people still in the struggle because you remember exactly where they are, and that memory keeps your purpose clean. Your success becomes less about proving something and more about building something that lasts. You don't erase your past because erasing it would erase the lessons, the awareness, the grit, the compassion, the vision you've developed. You repurpose it by using it as a reference point, by letting it guide your decisions, by allowing it to sharpen your intuition. You trust your instincts more because they were formed in real conditions, not comfort zones. This shift also frees you from shame because you realize the things you once hid were actually shaping you for something meaningful. Shame loses its grip when purpose takes over. You stop apologizing for your journey and start owning it fully. The highs, the lows, the mistakes, the recoveries, all of it becomes part of a larger story you're still writing. Choosing yourself in this way means you don't let pain turn into bitterness. You let it turn into wisdom. You don't let loss turn into fear. You let it turn into focus. You don't let rejection turn into self-doubt. You let it turn into clarity about where you're meant to be and where you're not. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've been tested, knowing you walked through fire and came out with direction. That confidence isn't loud. It doesn't need validation. It's rooted in experience, and that makes it unshakable because it's not based on hope alone. It's based on survival and growth. When pain becomes fuel, your movement has depth. Your words carry weight. Your actions have intention. You're no longer chasing purpose. You're living it because it's woven into everything you do. How you work, how you lead, how you serve, how you show up for yourself and others. Repurposing your past is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect because it honors what you endured without letting it define your limits. It turns wounds into wisdom and wisdom into impact. And that transformation is what happens when you finally choose yourself and decide that nothing you went through will be wasted. Not a moment, not a lesson, not a scar. Comfort has a way of disguising itself as safety. It feels warm, familiar, predictable. And that's why it's dangerous, because it slowly convinces you that where you are is good enough even when you know. Deep down, there's more in you. Comfort doesn't attack your dreams directly. It just puts them to sleep and lets time pass while potential waits patiently to be claimed. When you choose yourself, you start to feel that tension between who you are and who you could be. And once you feel it, you can't ignore it anymore. You realize that staying comfortable is costing you growth, clarity, and momentum. Costing you the version of yourself that only shows up when things get uncomfortable. And that realization changes how you move. Raising your standards doesn't happen all at once. It starts with small decisions, saying no to habits that drain your energy, even if they help you relax in the moment. Saying no to environments that keep you entertained but not inspired. Saying no to conversations that go in circles and leave you exactly where you started. Those no's feel heavy at first because they separate you from what's familiar, and familiarity is seductive. Choosing yourself means recognizing that some versions of you were built for survival, not expansion. Those versions helped you get through certain seasons, but if you carry them into the next chapter, they become limits instead of protection. And letting go of them feels like loss, because in a way it is your letting go of an identity you once needed. You stop tolerating what drains you because you finally understand that tolerance is not strength. Endurance without direction is just wasted energy. You become aware of how certain people, habits, and routines leave you feeling smaller, scattered, or stagnant, and instead of explaining it away, you honor the signal and create distance, not out of judgment, but out of self-respecting. What builds you becomes a priority. You guard your time, your focus, your mental space, because you've learned that not unlimited resources. You invest in environments that challenge you, conversations that stretch you, habits that compound. You understand that growth requires friction, and you stop confusing discomfort with danger. There's a real psychological shift that happens when standards rise. You stop negotiating with mediocrity. You stop lowering expectations to avoid disappointment. You accept that raising the bar may mean fewer people around, fewer options, fewer shortcuts, but it also means more alignment, more clarity, and more fulfillment. Higher standards don't make life easier, because ease was never the goal. Meaning is, and meaning comes from effort, from intentional choices, from living in integrity with your potential. When you raise your standards, you're not chasing perfection, you're committing to progress. You're saying, I respect my future enough to make uncomfortable decisions today. Real life examples are everywhere. Athletes who give up nights out to train. Artists who isolate to create, entrepreneurs who walk away from quick money to build something sustainable. From the outside, it looks like sacrifice. From the inside, it feels like alignment, because every no is connected to a bigger yes. Studies on delayed gratification show that people who can tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term gain tend to achieve higher levels of success and life satisfaction. Raising your standards trains that muscle. It teaches you to choose what matters over what's easy. And that skill becomes transferable to every area of your life. You also start noticing how comfort keeps you surrounded by people who don't challenge you, because challenge disrupts comfort. Raising your standards may lead to loneliness for a while, because not everyone wants to grow, and that's okay. Solitude is often a bridge between levels, not a destination, and learning to walk it with purpose builds inner strength. You stop tolerating disrespect, not just from others, but from yourself. You hold yourself accountable for how you show up, how you speak, how you follow through. You don't let yourself slide anymore, because you know every small compromise adds up and either builds your future or erodes it. This doesn't mean life becomes joyless. It means joy becomes earned. And deeper, you still enjoy life, but you don't let enjoyment derail your direction. You learn to balance discipline with fulfillment, and that balance is what creates sustainability. Comfort chases pleasure, standards create peace. When standards rise, excuses lose their power. You stop blaming circumstances because you're too busy adjusting strategy. You stop waiting for perfect conditions, because you know growth happens in imperfect ones. And that mindset creates momentum, because you're no longer dependent on external ease to move forward. Choosing yourself at this level requires courage because you're stepping away from who people expect you to be and stepping toward who you expect yourself to become. Not everyone will understand that shift. Some will take it personally. Some will question your change. Some will try to pull you back into familiar patterns, but you stay grounded because you know why. You raise the standard. You begin to see comfort as a checkpoint, not a destination, a place to rest briefly, but not to live permanently. You appreciate ease when it comes, but you don't build your life around avoiding discomfort. You build it around growth, impact, and purpose. Higher standards make life meaningful because they align your actions with your values. They reduce internal conflict because you're no longer living below your capacity, and that alignment creates a quiet confidence. You don't need to announce your standards. People feel them in how you move, how you choose, how you respond. Losing comfort is not a loss when it's replaced with clarity, direction, and self-respect. You trade temporary ease for lasting fulfillment, and once you experience that trade, you stop chasing comfort. Altogether, you start chasing excellence, not for applause, but for peace of mind, knowing you gave yourself a real chance to become everything you're capable of being. When you really choose yourself, your vision stretches past today, past next week, past the quick win that looks good on the surface but fades fast. You start to see life in longer frames, and that changes everything because you're no longer moving for applause, you're moving for impact. You're no longer chasing moments, you're building something that can stand when the noise dies down. Choosing yourself at this level is a commitment to legacy, not fame, not attention, but substance. At first, this shift feels uncomfortable because quick wins are addictive. They give you instant proof, instant validation, instant relief, but they don't last. And deep down, you know it. You've seen it play out. People rise fast and fall faster because nothing was anchored, nothing was reinforced, nothing was built to survive. Pressure. When you choose yourself, you decide you don't want temporary